Hello and welcome to this episode of the John Henry Westen Show. Seattle was in mayhem last week with one 6-block area occupied by openly communist groups. With the police unwilling to enter the zone and the governor clueless, President Trump warned he would have to take action. Interestingly, we also learned last week that heaven warned that there would be a communist takeover of America if heaven's warnings were not heeded. It seems it is just happening right before our eyes. You're going to want to stay tuned. Before we begin, thanks to a generous family, new monthly gifts to LifeSite News are being doubled for a year up to $120,000. So if you could please help us reach our goal of adding 2020, that's 2020, new monthly sustaining donors this year, we would be really, really grateful. And this show and all the shows and stories we do, coverage we do at lifesitenews.com will be able to continue. Also, you might want to have caught, or if you did catch or you didn't catch, you must be sleeping under a rock somewhere, Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano's letter to President Trump, which LifeSite released first, and it made it everywhere, including to the president himself, who tweeted the LifeSite story last week, much to our great joy, and boy, did it create a real flurry of activity at LifeSite News. So please go check it out. You can see all of that and more at LifeSite News. Also, remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with all your friends. Let's begin, as we always do, with the sign of the cross. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. So at LifeSite News last week, writer Dr. Micah Hickson drew attention to a fascinating interview conducted in 1947 with the last remaining seer of Fatima, Sister Lucia dos Santos. She was one of the 3 children of Fatima, Portugal, who in 1917 saw the Mother of Christ and received secret messages from Our Lady. The truth of these apparitions was confirmed by a stupendous miracle witnessed by 70,000 people and photographed and recorded in many newspapers, which involved the sun dancing in the sky. Sister Lucia revealed that in 1946 interview that Our Lady had revealed to her that even the United States of America would be overcome by communism if Russia was not consecrated to her Immaculate Heart by the Pope in union with the bishops. Well, given what's happening in America right now and what communism actually is and its goals for America, the account from Sister Lucia is truly remarkable. Dr. Hickson wrote at LifeSite News of the interview conducted by the well-respected American historian and author William Thomas Walsh. In 1947, Professor Walsh authored a book about Fatima titled Our Lady of Fatima, and at the end, he recounted in an epilogue the interview which he had conducted with Sister Lucia the year before, so it was in 1946. Now, one of the messages of Fatima received by the children in 1917 pertains to the then impending Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. And in the interview with Professor Walsh, she said, and I quote, "What Our Lady wants is that the Pope and all the bishops in the world shall consecrate Russia to her Immaculate Heart on one special day. If this is done, she will convert Russia and there will be peace. If it is not done, the errors of Russia will spread through every country in the world." Now, Walsh asked, according to this write-up that's in his book and in the epilogue, it says, does this mean, in your opinion, that every country without exception will be overcome by communism? And Sister Lucia answered yes. The interpreter during the interview, allowing Walsh, of course, to converse with Sister Lucia in her native Portuguese, was Father Manuel Roca. And he later revealed that Walsh asked explicitly about the United States of America, adding, and I quote, "And does that mean the United States of America too?" End quote. And Sister Lucia responded once more, saying yes. That is to say, the seer of the apparitions of Our Lady of Fatima, which have been approved by the Catholic Church, predicted that the United States, under certain conditions, would also be overcome by communism. Now, Dr. Hickson, in her LifeSite News article, notes that in 1946, Lucia's response might have sounded, well, somewhat unrealistic, given that it was just after the Second World War and it was the beginning of the Cold War. However, today, as we see the revolutionary riots in many American cities, it's really a different story. To appreciate how much communism has affected, and some might say overcome, America, requires actually an appreciation for communism itself and its goals. Now, communism is thought mainly to be like an economic system competing with capitalism. However, when we really comprehend communism, the spread of Russia's errors becomes recognizable. The Naked Communist is a book. It's probably the most concise and straightforward source outlining communist goals and ideology. It was written in 1962 by W. Cleon Skousen, a former FBI agent who used many original sources and the best intelligence of the FBI during its investigation of communist infiltration into the United States. He also published in there a list of 45 current communist goals. In fact, that list of 45 communist goals were recorded in the Congressional Record in 1963. President Ronald Reagan commented on the book's author, on Cleon Skousen, saying, quote, "No one is better qualified to discuss the threat to this nation from communism," end quote. A selection of the goals of communism I'm going to present you now. These are goals, again, listed by Skousen in his book. They actually serve to illustrate really well the spread of communism to all nations, and especially to America. You can find the full list of the 45 goals of communism, both in the Congressional Record, if you care to look it up, and in my blog post on this subject at LifeSite News. Now, it's recorded, if you're looking for it online, in the Congressional Record Appendix, pages A34 and A35 of the House of Representatives of January 10th, 1963. So once again, the Congressional Record Appendix, pages A34 and 35 of the House of Representatives of January 10th, 1963. So here are some of those goals, the goals, again, of communism, the current goals of communism, as Skousen termed it. And I quote, "Capture one or both of the political parties in the United States." Another one, "Get control of the schools, use them as transmission belts for socialism and current communist propaganda, soften the curriculum, get control of the teachers' associations, put the party line in textbooks." Now get that. Get control of the teachers' associations. Well, at LifeSite last year, we reported on the case of Rebecca Friedrichs, who spent 28 years teaching in California public schools and was the lead plaintiff in Friedrichs versus California Teachers Association, a 2016 Supreme Court case concerning forced union dues. Now, Friedrichs detailed how the California Teachers Association and the National Education Association advocate and donate heavily to a wide range of left-wing causes, including abortion and transgenderism. They work with far-left groups such as the Women's March, the American Civil Liberties Union, the Southern Poverty Law Center, Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network, and Sexuality Information and Education Council of the United States to push a radical sexual agenda onto our kids, she said, and to punish teachers, parents, and students who dare to speak out against it. Well, Friedrichs actually cited the case of Judy Burns, a Christian teacher in Ohio, who took the opportunity at the National Education Association, one of their meetings, to ask whether the phrase reproductive freedom in the group's resolutions included support for abortion up to delivery or partial birth abortion. And Bruns was mocked and shunned by the Ohio Education Association leaders, but got the answer, we have no restrictions. That means no limitations on abortion whatsoever. Friedrichs also, in the LifeSite News story, quoted a former teacher and executive director of Christian Education Association International, who said she had done some research showing nearly $800,000 of roughly $1 million in donations by the NEA to a 2014 PAC was directed to, you guessed it, Planned Parenthood. Now, the communist goals also include, and I quote, Gain control of all student newspapers. Infiltrate the press. Get control of book review assignments, editorial writing, policymaking positions. Gain control of key positions in radio, TV, and motion pictures. Well, the whole reason why we started LifeSite News nearly 25 years ago now is because it seemed almost all the mainstream media had a left-wing, anti-life, anti-family bias, and that situation has only gotten worse in the nearly quarter century we've been around. And without Fox News, there really wouldn't be any mainstream conservative television media at all in America. The communist goals continue, and I quote, "Continue discrediting American culture by degrading all forms of artistic expression." An American communist cell was told, quote, "Eliminate all good sculpture from parks and buildings, substitute shapeless, awkward, and meaningless forms," end quote. And quote again, "Control art critics and directors of art museums. Our plan is to promote ugliness, repulsiveness, meaningless art." Well, how many of us have gone to parks and museums only to be rather disgusted by, or at least confused by, the ugliness of the so-called art, which often seems, like our 3-year-old child could do a better job? But, if you were to say such a thing, you'd be sort of labeled as a Neanderthal and wholly unsophisticated, or maybe even unworthy for not seeing the deep art at play. Anyway, other communist goals include, quote, "Eliminate all laws governing obscenity by calling them censorship and a violation of free speech and free press. Also, break down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography and obscenity in books, magazines, motion pictures, radio, and TV." Check. Well, been there, done that. We're teaching pole dancing to children, for crying out loud, and the majority of movies now would have been considered pornographic years ago. Well, here's another example of a goal of communism. Present homosexuality, degeneracy, and promiscuity as normal, natural, and healthy. We've gone so far in this direction that we've made counseling for those people who want to leave the homosexual lifestyle illegal. And another communist goal is, quote, "Infiltrate the churches and replace revealed religion with social religion," end quote. Well, there can be no more obvious implementation of this than what we have seen in at least the Catholic Church in the USA over the last half century. Listen now to these other communist goals. Discredit the Bible and emphasize the need for intellectual maturity, which does not need a religious crutch. Discredit the American Constitution by calling it inadequate, old-fashioned, out of step with modern needs, a hindrance to cooperation between nations on a worldwide basis. Eliminate prayer or any phase of religious expression in the schools on the grounds that it violates the principle of separation of church and state. Discredit the family as an institution. Encourage promiscuity, masturbation, and easy divorce. Emphasize the need to raise children away from the negative influence of parents. Attribute prejudices, mental blocks, and retarding of children to suppressive influence of parents. Infiltrate and gain control of more unions. Infiltrate and gain control of big business. Incredible. Now, there's so much to unpack there, but I wanted to draw attention to a couple of items that are particularly striking in this list of communist goals, penned, by the way, in 1963. And these two are striking, especially given the mayhem we've been experiencing in America today. Listen to this. Quote, "Create the impression that violence and insurrection are legitimate aspects of the American tradition, that students and special interest groups should rise up and use united force to solve economic, political, or social problems." And then this communist goal, quote, "Transfer some of the powers of arrest from the police to social agencies. Treat all behavioral problems as psychiatric disorders, which no one but psychiatrists can understand or treat." Well, those two last items about insurrection and the use of violence being part of the good tradition, and about undoing police powers, That's exactly what we've witnessed since these riots began, with the excuse of the tragic death of George Floyd. President Trump actually described this situation quite pointedly described the whole situation really in America on Thursday in an eye-opening manner, which really shows just how far these communist ideals have entered America, even with the collusion of governors and mayors. Listen to this clip from President Trump, which was aired on Thursday.
It was like it started about a week ago where I heard they want to close up all police forces. That's what their attack on a very liberal governor in the state of Washington is. We want the police force closed. It's not like they want to sort of bring a little money into something else. They want it actually closed. And I'm thinking, what happens late at night when you make that call to 911 and there's nobody there? What do you do? Whether you're white, black, or anybody else, I mean, what do? You're dialing and there's somebody breaking into a house and it happens to be a violent person. There are violent people around, Pastor. Even you will admit that, right? Yes. We want to think the best, but you have some very violent people. And when they're breaking into your house at 12 o'clock in the evening and you're sitting there and you don't have a police force, they're actually talking about not having a police force. Well, that's not happening with us. We're going to have stronger police forces because that's what you need. In Minneapolis, they went through 3 nights of hell. And then I was insistent on having the National Guard go in and do their work. It was like a miracle. It just, everything stopped. And I'll never forget the scene. It's not supposed to be a beautiful scene, but to me it was, after you watch policemen running out of a police precinct. And it wasn't their fault. They wanted to do what they had to do, but they weren't allowed to do anything. It wasn't really their fault, but they were running down the street. They weren't allowed to do what they're trained to do. And they took over the precinct. They essentially burned it down. I'm pretty good at construction. I want to tell you, that was almost what we call a complete renovation, if you're lucky. And it was a very sad thing. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that. But we are very proud of the fact that I called. I said, I'm sorry, we have to have them go in. And they went in, and it was like a knife cutting butter right through, boom. I'll never forget, you saw the scene on that road, wherever it may be, in the city, Minneapolis. They were lined up, boom, they just walked straight. And yes, there was some tear gas and probably some other things, and the crowd dispersed and they went through. By the end of that evening, and it was a short evening, everything was fine, and you didn't hear too much about that location having problems anymore. They went to other locations, and the same thing would happen. As an example, Seattle would be so easy to solve.
And believe it or not, while all this was going down, 6 city blocks seized in Seattle, a police station forced to be abandoned. The leftist governor, Jay Inslee, claimed he knew nothing about it. Watch this.
I'd like to ask you about what's going on in Seattle. There's this thing called the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. What's your thought on that? The fact that the protesters have taken that over and not allowing people to come and go freely? And then regarding the National Guard.
Well, that's news to me, so I'll have to reserve any comment about it. I have not heard anything about that from any credible source. Not that you're not credible. It's just like, before I espouse an opinion, I should know of which I speak.
So it definitely seems like Our Lady of Fatima's prophecy of the spreading of Russia's errors, even in the United States, has come true. But we also know the solution heaven proposed was the consecration of Russia, and also that that day is coming, because of course she said it would be done. It would be done late, but it would be done, and then a period of peace would be given to the world. And so, after that consecration comes a never-before-experienced period of peace. So there's hope in the probably not too distant future, even though there may be, well, some tougher times coming before we get there. For LifeSite News, this is John Henry Westen, and may God bless you. Hello, this is John Henry Westen. I'd like to invite you to subscribe to the John Henry Westen Show YouTube channel if you haven't already done so. There you will find all the past episodes and much more. Thanks again for watching, and may God bless you.